friends, welcome back to the channel and to Not Life Advice, which is a new series where I'm going to be giving not life advice to various subscribers and answering their questions. So, I spend a lot of time on this channel talking about my own personal productivity, talking about general strategies for being more productive and doing more of what matters to you, hence the title Feel Good Productivity, which you can check out. But I thought it would be fun to actually take in proper questions from real life people who follow this channel and see if I can give some not life advice to, for whatever it's worth, trying to help people with their own productivity issues or with procrastination or distraction or focus, or helping my subscribers achieve their goals in some way or another. So in this video, I'm going to be responding to 3 of my subscribers who have sent in video questions. There will be timestamps down below if you would like to skip around. But otherwise, I hope you enjoy this first episode of Not Life Advice.
Hi, my name is Morgan and I run the YouTube channel Morgan EUA, but the challenge that I'm actually struggling to overcome is actually my PhD dissertation in theater studies. I have been working on it for almost 7 years now and I'm really ready to be done, but it's really challenging, deep work right now, and I'm struggling to get motivated to sit down and work on it for many hours at a time, especially because it's very difficult thought work. Doing it for 4+ hours in one sitting is very exhausting, and it's difficult to maintain my focus on this task for that long. The other part of this issue is that I also have a YouTube channel. I'm also a teacher. I also have a volunteer gig and a contract gig. And so all of those things are easier to do for my brain and have more pressing deadlines. So I find myself tending to more easily motivate myself to do those other things rather than my PhD. So if you could help me figure out how to get motivated and then stay in it once I am in it, because I do enjoy the work after I start doing the work, but then I start to get tired or my mind wanders off, that would be awesome. And all of your recent videos have been very helpful in tackling this challenge and getting my PhD done. So thank you for even more help in this project.
Alrighty, we have a wonderful question from our friend Morgan here. Now, Morgan has identified, basically the issues are, she's struggling to get started. When she gets started, the work is enjoyable, but she struggles to focus for long periods of time. It's easier to work on YouTube, teacher, volunteer, contract stuff. Those things tend to have urgent deadlines, and so there's more of a sense of motivation in order to make progress in those things. Clearly, Morgan is doing quite a lot of things. I suspect you, if you're watching this, wherever you are, you're also probably juggling quite a lot of things, and it can often be really hard to focus on the thing that is not urgent, but important and hard. When we have all this other list of options to choose from that are more urgent, easier, and more fun. I'm not generally in the business of advice giving because, I don't know Morgan, I don't know Morgan's situation, but I can try and explain how I would approach this. So the way I would approach this is that this is kind of an activation energy type graph. And you can think of it almost like you're trying to push a boulder up the hill. Now, whenever you get started with a task, it always takes more energy to get started because you're pushing the boulder up the hill. We have to overcome the hump of procrastination in order to even get started with a task. Now, Morgan has identified that one of the things she struggles with is to get started with the task. So when it comes to getting started, there's a few different things that we can do. Basically, all of them involve lowering this hump. We want this hump to go down so that it's easier to get started. This is ironically not ironically, but this is kind of what the middle 3 chapters of my book, chapters 4, 5, and 6, are about. In terms of how do we essentially make it easier to get started? It's like, imagine you're trying to work out at the gym. Now imagine you're lifting a really light weight. It's very easy to, lie on the bench and lift a light weight, right? But imagine if you stacked it up with loads of weights. It's very hard to get started if you've stacked it up with loads of weights. Similarly, we want to make it as easy as possible to get started with a task that we're working on. Now, how do we make things easy? Well, essentially it's about reducing 2 types of friction. Those are reducing environmental friction, and secondly, it's about reducing emotional friction. So environmental friction. If, for example, I was struggling to make progress on my PhD, can I reduce as much friction to get started environmentally? So have I got my desk set up in a nice way that makes it super easy and obvious for me to sit down and get started working on the PhD? The night before, can I open up the relevant Google Doc or whatever Chrome tab that I need to have open to make sure that when I sit on my computer, it's easy for me to get started. I've reduced the environmental friction. And the second thing is to reduce the emotional friction. So there's often a lot of emotional or cognitive friction if we feel that it's unclear. So if, for example, I was Morgan, I'd be making a plan the night before. I'd be saying to myself, okay, I'm gonna figure out exactly what my plan is to work on the PhD the following day. I can't just say I'm gonna work on my PhD, because that's a huge mountain. It's like, we've got to break it down into what specifically am I gonna get started with. So maybe it's like, I'm gonna write the first 100 words of my PhD thesis write-up of chapter 4 or paragraph 8. It's like, we're just trying to get really specific so that our brain doesn't have kind of, I've got to figure out what I need to do. Because like, figuring out what you have to do takes it's a whole other ball game than actually doing the thing. So having a very clear plan of action. And then secondly, it's about lowering the bar. From Morgan's question, it sounds like Morgan is an overachiever, given that she is doing a PhD, has been doing it for 7 years, has a YouTube channel, is a teacher, is a volunteer, and also does contract work. That is the absolute hallmark of an overachiever. The problem with overachievers is that we tend to set very high standards for ourselves, and that can often make it really hard to get started with something. It adds a lot of emotional friction. If I feel I have to bench, 100 kg, it's like, how do we make it easier to get started? How do we reduce the emotional friction? One thing I find really helpful is I tell myself, I'm just gonna do the thing for just 5 minutes. Or, hey, I just need to write 100 words. Because as Morgan has realized, when she gets started with it, she enjoys the process. And enjoying the process is how the hill goes down. But getting the boulder over the hump in the first place is like the cold start problem of trying to get started. So we reduce environmental friction by making it really obvious and really easy to start. We reduce emotional friction by making it really clear exactly what we have to do and lowering the bar so that, even just working on it for 5 minutes is a win. Even just writing 50 words is a win. And then generally, when you get into the flow of it, you start to enjoy the process, you start to feel good about the work. That's the whole point of the book, feel good productivity. Then it becomes a lot easier to keep going. By the way, if you're watching this before the 20th of April, 2024, I'm actually hosting a completely free online workshop. It's an alignment workshop, where the idea is that, we're now nearly 4 months into the year. And so we're going to reflect on our goals for 2024. We're going to make a plan for what we're going to do moving forward and figure out what kind of systems and habits we can put in place to stay disciplined and consistent en route to achieving the things that matter to us. It's completely free. Hopefully there'll be thousands of people online. It's gonna be sick. It's like 2 hours long, so you can join that completely for free. Link down below. Another thing I would probably say to Morgan is, it is a lot easier to do the hard thing first thing in the morning. So if, for example, I was Morgan and I was having to do work on my PhD thesis, this was sort of the position I was in when I was finishing up the edits for my book. It was hard, it was deep work, it required a lot of thought, and I had all these other things, other fun things I could have done, like make a video or hang out with my team or grow the business or work out a marketing asset, like loads of stuff that was way more fun than having to do the edits for the book. There were 2 occasions when I actually got the work done. Number 1, where I just set a rule for myself that 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock every morning, I am not allowed to do anything other than work on the book. And even if I don't do anything, I have to just sit there for those 3 hours. And I'm not allowed to schedule anything, not allowed to do anything. It's just like I had this as a rule for myself. And on the days where I stuck to the rule, then I made loads of progress in the edits for my book. So that would be like the consistency approach. Like imagine this is your weekly calendar, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, that sort of thing. And you wake up at 7 and then from 9 till 12, each day you're blocking off that purely to work on the PhD thesis or whatever the difficult thing is. Maybe even on a Saturday and a Sunday. But that's sort of a question mark because it's up to you. That would be like consistent progress over time. That often is a good way to get things done. But the other good way of getting things done is the intensity approach. Now, this is good for things that have a very specific outcome and a very specific thing that you have to do. This is not good for things you have to do over a very long time. But that would be where, I don't know, let's say this is let's say your monthly calendar, and you were to decide, you know what, on that day and that day and that day and that day, based on what's available in your calendar and what you're doing and like not having any meetings and stuff, you can decide, I'm just going to devote the entire day to just work on the PhD thesis. You might even decide, you know what, I need to get this freaking PhD out of the way, therefore I'm going to take a 1-week holiday and I'm going to take myself to a random place that is away from all distractions and all friends, and I'm going to spend Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday only working on the PhD and not allowing myself to do anything else. And I know that in those 5 days, I'm going to make enormous progress. This is, I believe, what the writer Maya Angelou used to do. She would take herself to a boring-ass hotel room, and she would just sit on the bed, and she would write in a legal pad. And that was how she got her writing done, in an environment where there were no other distractions. That's a bit like more hardcore, but you know, sometimes desperate times call for desperate measures. Okay, so we've talked about how Morgan could potentially get started on this thing by lowering the bar, reducing the environmental and the emotional friction, making it easy to get started. Thankfully, Morgan already enjoys the process, so that makes it a lot easier to do. But the other problem Morgan is having is that the problem with not being able to focus for 4 hours. The thing here is that like, I can't focus for 4 hours. Very few people can actually focus for 4 hours. I think 4 hours is the absolute upper limit of being able to focus on a single task. If you're just doing it all day, then you'll generally get 4 hours of focused work in that whole day. But trying to do 4 hours of focused work and actually focus for all of those 4 hours is just really, really, really hard to do. The way I kind of think about this is I think about it in terms of just single hours. Like let's say this is an hour. So 60 mins. In my head, like the first 5 mins is sort of like prepare and plan, which is like, okay, let me figure out what I'm actually going to do. Let me sort of prepare my space, get my cup of water, make sure I've gone for a wee, blah, 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 make sure I've washed my hands, etc., etc. The next 45 mins is to focus / just do the thing, just work focus for 45 minutes. And then the final 10 minutes is for recharge and reflect. And that's like, okay, cool, I'm gonna stretch my legs a little bit. I'm gonna reflect on how focused was I. You can give yourself a focus rating from like 0 to 10 or how many stars. You're like, you know what, that was 4 stars of focus. And you can reflect on what do I wanna improve or do differently in my next focus session. Maybe it's like, oh, actually I got pinged with a bunch of notifications. I should probably turn my notifications off for this focus hour. Or I found myself watching a YouTube video. Maybe I should download the app Opal, for example, which is very good, that blocks YouTube. So I don't allow myself to do that. And it's almost like we're running these intentionally focused hours as a bit of like kind of mini experiments. This is a big part of what I talk about in the book. Thinking like a productivity scientist or productivity alchemist, as if you're running experiments. And then based on the data that you got from the experiment, you're kind of measuring your measurement output, which could be your focus rating, or it could be how many words you've written. You know, I like tracking word counts, for example. And you're just sort of running an experiment to see, okay, that worked. What if I try and focus in the local coffee shop downstairs with some headphones and a flat white? Like, what does that do to my focus levels and my word count? And now you're running these sorts of experiments, which means you're never actually trying to focus for 4 hours. Because I think trying to focus for 4 hours is a bit of a pipe dream. You're just trying to focus for 1 hour at a time. And if you can do 3 of these kind of blocks where you're doing 45 minutes of work, 5 minutes of planning, 10 minutes of resting and reflecting, if you can do 3 of those, 9 till 12 every morning, man, you'll get the PhD thesis done in no time at all. This is how I made progress on the book, more or less. This is what I would recommend when it comes to this sort of thing. The other thing I really like, just as a final point, because I just have so much to say on the topic, having been through this a lot with my book and with my medical degree and with all of the things, like I'm very familiar with like how the process goes. The other thing I find super helpful is something I talk about in chapter 2, which is about power, which is essentially, can you make progress visible? So I really like, you know, like how video game designers have this sort of like level up meter, where as you kill the monsters and shit, then you like level up, and you see your experience bar kind of going up as you go along, and that feeling of progress is profoundly addictive and one of the key drivers of intrinsic motivation. You know, this feeling of mastery, this feeling of progress, the feeling that we're moving forward, all of this stuff. So can you find a way to make progress more visible? This is why I personally really like word counts. I write, whenever I need to write anything, I write in the app Ulysses. You can do it in a Word doc, you can do it in anything that tracks your word count. Because then it's sort of like, whenever I find myself like feeling a bit distracted or feeling a bit like low energy, I look at my timer to see, have I still got time in my 45-minute session? Okay, still got 28 minutes, shit, okay. Then I look at the word count, and I'm like, nice, we've already written 150 words, let's keep going. And it's like having that sense of being able to see the progress you're making and really feel it, really connect emotionally with the fact that you are doing the thing, makes you feel really good. And as we know, feeling good leads to more productivity, all of that fun stuff. So find a way to make your progress visible. Now, I've been studying productivity for over 15 years, even wrote a book about it. But one resource that really helped me improve my own productivity was actually my friend Thomas Frank's online course on productivity. Now in this course, he goes through task management, getting better at email, and all of the things that mean that you're more organized, which free up time for you to focus on the more important things, like working on your PhD or writing your book or whatever the thing might be. And this course is hosted on Skillshare, who are very kindly sponsoring this video. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of classes led by industry pros across film, illustration, design, freelancing, and so much more. Now, I've personally been teaching on Skillshare since 2019, so I've got around 10 classes on there myself, but sometimes it can be overwhelming to know where to start. So Skillshare have designed learning paths as well to help you go from beginner to pro in as short a time as possible. I've got a learning path there on the platform, which includes 4 classes all about productivity, which will help you do more of what matters to you. And there's a great learning path about building your own creative business as well. So if you're interested in checking out any of these classes or anything else that Skillshare has to offer, then check out the link in the video description. And the first 500 people to use that special link will get a 1-month free trial to Skillshare, where you can consume all the classes to your heart's content. So thank you so much, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video. Let's move on to question number 2.
Hey Ali, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Patrick and I'm from Switzerland. Around 2 years ago, I finished my bachelor's degree in business IT, and since then I've been really struggling to find something that I'm really passionate about. I'm interested in photography, finance and IT, but I'm currently working as a business analyst for a Swiss corporation. And my question for you would be, what can I do to find my true passion and earn money with it, as you did with productivity and teaching? Hope this finds you well, and see you soon.
Alrighty, Patrick from Switzerland. How can I find my true passion and monetize it? Oh, this is a big one. This is a very big one. How do you find your true passion and monetize it? So, the first thing I'm going to say is that is probably the wrong question to be asking. I would recommend reading Cal Newport's book, So Good They Can't Ignore You. I actually have a video about it where I've summarized the book. But basically, Cal's whole theory in this is that, which I agree with, generally it's not the case that a passion is just something you just, I just need to uncover my passion. Like, I have all these passions and I just need to find a way to monetize them. That's generally not how it works. Generally, you want to try and aim to become so good they can't ignore you. You want to pick something and you want to get really good at the thing, because getting really good at the thing helps you become passionate about the thing. As you develop career capital, you then have the ability to cash in that career capital for things like autonomy and flexibility and stuff. And then if you want, you can start your own thing, you can monetize it in a certain way. Essentially, your goal is to really run experiments. It's not about, hey, I'm passionate about, I'm passionate about photography, finance, and IT. Therefore, how can I find my true passion and monetize it? Firstly, you also don't want to do that. So let's say you decide you've got a passion for photography. Okay, cool. The fastest way to kill your passion for photography will be to try and monetize it, especially if you have to make a living from it. Professional photographers don't spend most of their time taking nice photos. They spend most of their time doing admin and trying to actually get clients for their services. Similarly, if you were to start a business within finance and IT, you wouldn't be spending a lot of time doing finance and IT. Also, finance and IT are just absolutely huge topics. I suspect you don't enjoy bookkeeping as much as you enjoy strategic, like financial operations. There's different aspects within finance, so it is worth getting clear on what specifically do you think you're passionate about. But you're going to spend a large majority of your time trying to actually generate clients, trying to win the work rather than do the work. And generally, people enjoy doing the work rather than winning the work. But if you try and monetize your passion, you're going to spend 90% of the time winning the work and 10% of the time actually doing the work. All that said, the way I would be thinking about this is kind of using a kind of life design experimental framework. And I would be thinking in terms of ideate, experiment, iterate, and back to ideate. So let's say I rate my job satisfaction a 3 out of 10. Can I start by generating 10 different ideas of how I might increase my job satisfaction to a 5 out of 10, from a 3 to a 5 out of 10? Now, let's say one of those ideas is I'm currently doing a job as a business analyst in my corporation, but actually I think I might enjoy sort of working in the product team instead. Okay, cool. We've generated an idea. Let's generate like 10 of those. One of them might be, I will be happier if I quit my job and become a professional photographer. One of them might be, I'll be happier if I just quit my job and start an IT services business, or if I quit my job and start a financial services business. And then you run experiments and you try and figure out what is the smallest experiment I can run to test this hypothesis. So for example, let's say I thought, you know what? I really like the idea of becoming a professional photographer. The bad experiment to run would be to quit my job and become a professional photographer, because that's a very big experiment. I'm like doing a big thing to gather data. How else might I be able to experiment with, is that likely to be true? Well, could I reach out to professional photographers in my local area and be like, hey man, I'm thinking of quitting my corporate job to become a professional photographer. Would love to treat you to a coffee or a lunch or a breakfast or a dinner just to talk about it, because I'm so curious as to how you're finding the career. You send 10 of those messages, especially if it's local, and especially if you're nice about it and you offer to meet in person and treat them to a coffee. Most people will say yes to that. And so you now talk to 3 professional photographers and you say, hey, so I've got a passion for photography, and I'm thinking that maybe if I quit my job and become a pro, it'll make me happier with life. And you might hear them say, man, I would totally recommend it. Being a professional photographer is sick. It's so easy. It's so fun. You're going to love it. Or you might hear them say, actually, to be honest, dude, I thought I had a passion for photography, and now the fact I'm a professional photographer makes me freaking hate photography, and so I would not recommend it. Based on that, you've just gathered data without having to take a massive risk. Let's say you think that working in the product team at your local company is actually going to be a better way of increasing your job satisfaction. Go speak to the people in the product team and say, what does your day-to-day look like? Often the happiness of a job doesn't come from the macro sense of, hey, I'm following my passion because I'm a professional photographer. It comes from the micro, what tasks am I actually doing day to day? So you look at these people's calendar and you say, what does a day in your life look like? Well, I get up at 7 a.m, I commute into work, straight onto 4 hours of Zoom meetings where I'm having to take copious notes. Then I have half an hour to work on some code for the product, and then I have to go on another meeting with the manager, and then I have to hop on a meeting with the client, which is another Zoom call. So on average, every single day I have 6 hours of Zoom calls. You're like, damn, suddenly working in the product team at my company doesn't seem so appealing. Whereas, I'm working in the product team seemed appealing in the macro, but it's very unappealing in the micro. And the micro is where job satisfaction comes from rather than the macro. Run a bunch of these different experiments. And then once you find one that you actually want to kind of devote some time and energy into, you then start thinking, okay, let's say the best experiment I came up with was, I don't know, quit my job to start a financial services company. And I spoke to 3 people who run a financial services company, and they all recommend it and they all say it's sick. And I'm like, hopefully during those conversations, I asked them, hey, can I just shadow you for 3 days in the day job just to see what it's like? Because I'm thinking I might want to go into this career. Over time, you can increase the amount of energy you're putting into these experiments and sort of strategically narrowing down your options into this is the thing I'm actually really passionate about. I'm really enjoying this particular thing. So for me, what it looks like in the macro is Ali quit his job to follow his passion, which is teaching and YouTube. In reality, for the last 17 years of my life, I've been tinkering around trying to make money on the internet in different ways. Aged 13 to 18, I was trying to do websites online. I was doing private tutoring. Aged 18 through 23, I was running a company helping people get into med school. I was building websites and stuff. And all of this stuff was sort of fun. And then a lot of it became not fun, so I started delegating some of it, so shifting some of it. Age 24, I decided to start my YouTube channel, and that was a thing that was fun. There were lots of periods of it that weren't fun. I wouldn't have said I was passionate about making videos, but I found that it worked, and I developed a passion for making videos over time. So it's although at first glance it might look like, oh, you just find a passion and then you do it as a career. In reality, it's a much more squiggly, weirdy, windy kind of path that you can't really predict. But this general model of ideate, experiment, and iterate, it's just come up with ideas, run experiments, improve on those experiments, come up with more ideas. And if you do this enough time, you sort of spiral into a job and a life and a career that you really love. Most people who earn money are not passionate about the way in which they're earning money. So it is rare to find someone who loves their job so much that they would choose to do it even if they weren't getting paid for it. That's probably the kind of career we all ultimately want to end up in. Something that we're not doing just for the money, but we're doing for the passion, for the fulfillment, for the purpose, for the joy, all of that fun stuff. That's broadly why I do YouTube. I don't need the money anymore. I'm rich enough, but it's the passion, the purpose, and all that jazz. So it's a slow and windy process. But the fact that you're thinking about it, Patrick, means that you're thinking about the right things. You're asking the right questions. I would encourage you to read So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. I would encourage you to check out the book Think Big, Take Small Steps by Professor Grace Lorden. I also have an interview with her on my podcast, and I think I'm pretty sure we've done a video about that book as well. And I guarantee in the next few years, you're probably going to look back on this and think damn, this process of ideate, experiment, iterate, etc., has gotten me to a place where I genuinely love what I'm doing. So I wish you all the best for that, and thank you for asking the question.
I'm Alex, and among some of my goals this year, my most major one has been trying to get a full-time job. I'm 30 years old, and I've never had a full-time job before, so navigating that has been a little bit difficult for me. Currently, I've been working with children for the past 4 years, and while that was very fulfilling for me in the past, I'm now not finding that to be a very fulfilling occupation any longer. And my most recent wheel from March 2024, we can see career here. Sorry that it's backwards. My alignment for money, mission, and growth are all at once. And I think, one of the biggest struggles that I'm facing, other than trying to figure out what it is that I want to do, I think I'm struggling with that. I don't know how to, keep finding the motivation and the strive and avoiding the burnout when I feel like all I'm getting is rejection after rejection. And I'll tailor my resume for job postings and I'll try to write cover letters specifically for the job, and I just get no after no after no, and it's so demoralizing. And I don't know what to do to keep my spirits up, because I feel like I know what I can bring to the table, and it's just so difficult to want to keep trying when I feel like no one else is seeing it.
Whew. This is not a position, I'll be honest, this is not a position I've ever been in, but I have lots of friends who are in this position where they're getting rejection after rejection after rejection. And as an employer, and having seen thousands of job applications for people trying to work for me, I think I have a good sense of what it takes to stand out. So the first thing to say is we've actually made a video about this. That will be linked up there and down here. Everything I mentioned in this video, I'm referring people to a lot of additional resources, because I've made like 800 videos on this channel, and I'm probably one of the very few people who has a somewhat encyclopedic knowledge of what they actually are. So I'll link our video about resumes down below. Essentially, the key is, okay, so question one is like, what do I actually want to do? I think this is this ideate, experiment, iterate process that we talked about in the previous question. But question number two is, how do I deal with rejection when it comes to job application? I think really the key thing for anyone listening to this is that if you're trying to get a job, the traditional ways of going about getting a job are absolutely terrible. Book recommendation, The Third Door by Alex Benayan. Amazing, amazing, amazing book. His whole thesis, you should read the book. Especially Alex, if you're watching this, you should absolutely read that book. That book made me cry multiple times. Even the acknowledgement section of that book made me cry because it's just so good. I love Alex. The whole idea is that life and work and everything is kind of like a nightclub, in that there are three entrances. The first entrance, the first door, is where people are queuing up. Right? For normal people, they're queuing up. The second door is the one for the billionaires and the celebrities. But there's always, what no one tells you is that in business and in life, there is always a third door. The third door is when you kind of sneak down the alley, you open up the window, you go into the kitchen, you make friends with the chef, you be like, hey, I'm trying to get into the nightclub, any chance you could help me out? And the chef's like, oh, you're a cool guy, yeah, sure, come on in, I'll let you in by the back door. There is always a third door. When you hear of most instances of very successful people, you find that they didn't queue up for the first door, and they weren't already billionaires or celebrities. They took the third door. The way Steven Spielberg got his first Hollywood film. He snuck onto the set in Universal Studios or something. He jumped off the tour bus and tried to find his way onto a movie set where they could offer him a job. It was something weird like that. Or how Bill Gates landed his first software deal. And there's a bunch of different examples of how people went in via the third door. So the advice I would give for anyone who is trying to get a job anywhere is you cannot hope to get a job if you are applying via the first door. If you're applying via the first door, there are hundreds of people trying to apply for that same job. So unless you're on paper, the absolute best candidate, you are just very unlikely to get through that screen. Instead, there is always a third door to get the job. The second door would be having a rich dad or having a mate who knows someone, nepotism stuff. But there is always a third door. So what might that third door look like? There are kind of two approaches. There is the scattergun approach, and then there's the sniper approach. The scattergun approach is, I need a job. I'm going to apply to lots of things in the hope that one person will say yes to me or give me an interview. That is a recipe for rejection. This is a terrible way to get a job. It works for some people, maybe it used to work in the past. Having hired a bunch of people now for our team, we've got a team of 23 people. This is not the way to do it. The way to do it is the sniper approach. Really decide of the jobs that seem to be available, and even of the jobs that do not seem to be available, because the best jobs are never advertised. This is also something no one tells you. The best jobs are never ever advertised. Find 5 or so companies in your local area where you think, or not in your local area if you want to work remotely, and think, I would freaking love to work for that company. That would be an absolute dream as part of your experiment, ideate, iterate process, all that fun stuff. Let's say for whatever reason you want to work remotely for me. You're like, oh man, Ali Abdaal's team seems really cool. I've been watching his vlogs and all this sort of stuff. I really want to work for Ali Abdaal's team. You're very unlikely to get the job if you apply for one of our job postings. Hundreds of people apply for all of our job postings. We have a very stringent filtration process. We reject 90% people in the first round because we are looking at what we can see on paper. But how else do people get a job here? Well, what you could do is you could find the names of the people in my team, and you could try and talk to them. You're never going to be able to get access to me, realistically, unless you come to one of my events, in which, that could work as well. People have gotten jobs by coming up to me at events and striking a conversation and being cool about it. But it's pretty obvious who my team are. You can probably guess their email addresses based on what their first names are. You can watch all my vlogs and think, okay, how do I find the third door to work for Ali Abdaal? This is not just about working for me, this is about any company you could possibly want to work for. There's always a third door. You figure out like, okay, how can I get in touch with the second in command, the third in command, the fourth in command? Like, I know that Ali always references Tintin as YouTube producer. I know he's just done an interview on Deep Dive with Tintin, the YouTube producer. I wonder, if I reach out to Tintin, I'd be way more likely to get a response than if I reach out to Ali. Okay, cool. Let me reach out to Tintin. Oh, I see Tintin does freelance consulting. Can I just pay a couple $100 to book a call with Tintin? And in that call, I can find out if he's cool. I can say, Tintin, you know, what are your problems? Anything I can help you out with? Can I find a way to add value to Tintin's life, one of Ali's team members, so that I can then, you know, add lots and lots of value for free? And then eventually I can say to Tintin, hey man, I'd actually really love to work for you guys. Like, it seems like the absolute dream company to work at. Like, any chance I could kind of work for you for free for a month, just try me out. You don't even have to pay me. I'll literally do anything. I'm this. I think it'll be absolutely sick. Try me out for a month. If you don't like it, you don't have to pay me. Tintin would probably be like, you know what? Sure. A growing startup, a growing company always has more jobs that need doing than there are people to do them. But the traditional hiring process for most companies is such a freaking ball ache, such an absolute nightmare, that like they're just not going to do it. If it's a bigger company, they've got entire HR departments dealing with the whole thing. You probably want to get a more interesting job at a much smaller company, maybe a company like mine, maybe a startup. There is always a third door. Watch my interview that I did with Nicholas Cole on the Deep Dive podcast. We talk in that interview about the power, the ROI of free, the absolute incredible power of doing free work for someone to be able to then land a job. Most of the people who I now have in my team have gotten there through a third door in some way or another, rather than by the traditional job application route. Some of my team have gotten through the traditional job application route, but like the majority, I would say, have gotten in through the third door. There is always a third door to find whatever job you want to do. It is the sniper mentality. It's identifying like 3 companies that you would love to work for, and then third dooring your way into them by showing up, by providing value, by being good, by being competent, by doing stuff for free, and then they will be delighted to hire you, because I can guarantee that if a company is growing, if a company is like, then they're gonna have so much stuff that they need done and not enough people to do it, not enough competent people to do it. They probably won't have time to go through a proper hiring process, and that's why the third door is the way forward. And one final thing on the rejection point, you know, it's clear from your question, Alex, that you're feeling pretty down about this whole rejection stuff. And you know, I've not been in the situation, but I've been rejected by girls many times, and I can imagine how it feels to be rejected for jobs. It can often feel as if it's a rejection of you as a person. You feel like, you know, you said in your question this thing of like, I know I have the value to provide, but they're not seeing it. And that is a really sort of disempowering and sort of this like feeling of powerlessness that like, look, I'm trying here, I'm trying to show the value I can bring, but like the other person isn't seeing it. I get it, man. Like it's a tough place to be. The way I've always approached it when dealing with rejection from like girls or in anything else is to recognize that it's almost certainly not a rejection of me as an individual. Like the fact that you're getting rejected from these jobs is not because you're a bad person or because you suck. It is because your application sucks and your method sucks. Like if I lose a game of chess, that's not because I suck as a human being. It's just that my strategy was bad. Cool. So let's focus on the strategy, which is a problem out there, rather than focusing on like myself and my self-esteem, which is a problem in here, which is a lot harder to fix and a lot more likely to lead to these feelings of demoralization and stuff. Anyway, that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you guys got some value from it. I will put a link to the video thing, because if you enjoyed this video, if you'd like to ask us more questions, anyone, to respond in a later video, this was fun. I like doing this sort of thing. It's nice to see people in real life to ask me questions and stuff, because I feel like, yeah, this is good shit. So if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to ask a question, check out the link down in the video description. And if you've gotten to this point in the video, you are gonna probably love and probably vibe with my Why You Feel Lost in Life series. This is not me trying to call you out, it's just that this is a good series on figuring out a life and work vision and goals and stuff. And basically everyone who's asked, all these 3 people who've asked questions would benefit from doing that sort of life vision work design exercise that I talk about in this playlist right over here. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.